An agent requested a cup of coffee from an ordinary-looking dispensing machine. Moments later, he was sweating, dizzy, and collapsing to the floor. What the cup actually contained and why its contents matched the agent himself is documented later in this file. The machine remains operational. Personnel are permitted to use it. The subject began to sweat profusely and complained of dizziness before collapsing, moments after confirming a selection at the machine. The incident is recorded in document SCP-294-A, pertaining to Incident 294-01. On August 21, 2005, at approximately 9:30 in the morning, an agent of the Foundation, identified in the report only by his given name and a redacted surname, attempted to use item SCP-294 to obtain coffee during his allotted break period. At the request of a second agent, whose stated purpose was, quote, to see what it would do, end quote, the first agent requested from the item a cup of joe. The selection was confirmed. Within moments, the requesting agent lost consciousness and was moved by responding personnel to the site infirmary for evaluation and stabilization. The cup dispensed by item SCP-294 during the incident was recovered from the dispensing area by the attending medical team. Its contents were logged as a combination of blood, tissue, and other bodily fluids. Subsequent laboratory testing of the recovered material returned a definitive result. The DNA sequence of the biological matter dispensed by SCP-294 was found to match that of the agent who had placed the request. The affected agent was retained in the care of Foundation medical staff for a period of 4 weeks, during which he received bed rest and intravenous hydration. He made, according to the file, a complete recovery. Follow-up X-rays and CAT scans of the subject showed no further signs of injury or lingering internal harm, and he was released from the infirmary and returned to duty. Both agents involved in the incident were formally reprimanded. Additional security measures governing the operation of and access to SCP-294 were recommended in the closing lines of the document. Further observation of SCP-294 has yielded several noteworthy operational characteristics. It has been documented that after approximately 50 uses, the machine ceases to respond to further requests. Attempts to elicit a dispensation during this dormant interval consistently fail. Following a period of approximately 90 minutes, the machine appears to restock itself through means that remain undetermined. No external resupply has been observed, and no consumable reservoir has been identified within the housing of the unit. Of additional interest is the composition of the paper cups dispensed by SCP-294. A range of caustic liquids, of a nature that would ordinarily degrade a standard paper vessel within seconds, have been observed to produce no discernible effect upon these cups. The cups retain their structural integrity for the duration of testing, regardless of the corrosive properties of their contents. The material composition of the cups has not yet been fully characterized, and analysis is pending. Testing of SCP-294 is ongoing. Prior to the reclassification of access protocols, and as suggested through internal recommendation, SCP-294 was relocated to the second-floor personnel break room. The stated purpose of this relocation was to serve as a money-saving venture, permitting personnel to obtain beverages from the machine during standard duty hours in place of conventional refreshment services. This arrangement was maintained until the occurrence of Incident 294-01. Following Incident 294-01, the informal use of SCP-294 by general personnel was terminated. Guards were stationed at the item on a continuous basis, and a security clearance became necessary in order to interact with it. Requests for use are now formally documented, and unsupervised access is prohibited. The machine remains within the designated area under revised containment conditions, and its operation is subject to standing review. Subsequent addenda expand the investigative record. Following review of existing documentation on SCP-294, a member of research personnel proposed testing the machine's capacity to retrieve specific liquids from a distance. This proposal was accepted and formalized as part of ongoing evaluation, and further trials were authorized under supervisory oversight. Under the direct supervision of an overseer whose designation has been expunged from the accessible file, a request was entered into the machine specifying a cup of the secretion produced by SCP-075. The product delivered was verified to be the requested liquid, and the cup itself was observed to contain the material without failure of the vessel. The significance of this trial, however, emerged only in retrospect. The report for the corresponding incident involving SCP-075 was acknowledged approximately 2 hours after the test had concluded. Review of that report established that a containment procedure breach had occurred at precisely the same time the machine was being operated. During this breach, SCP-075 was roused to its active stage and was able to secrete an amount of basic solution equal to the capacity of a coffee cup before emergency containment measures were applied and the entity was returned to a passive state. The secreted material itself was not recovered during the post-incident investigation, and its disposition remains formally unaccounted for. A subsequent trial pursued a different line of inquiry. A researcher entered a request for a cup of gold. The machine responded by dispensing a cup of molten gold presented within the standard vessel without apparent structural compromise. Following this outcome, the researcher submitted requests for further precious materials of comparable character. In each case, the machine produced the requested substance in the same manner, indicating that the retrieval function extends beyond conventional liquids to materials rendered into a fluid state at the point of delivery. Further testing was undertaken to establish the outer limits of the object's retrieval capacity. From a designated safe range, a researcher entered a request for a cup of anti-water. The machine hummed briefly, as it does when preparing to dispense, but no vessel emerged. Instead, the entry pad displayed the message, "out of range." From this result, current theory holds that SCP-294 possesses a finite range of collection, and that its retrieval function cannot extend into alternate universes or parallel dimensions. The precise boundary of this range remains undetermined, though the response suggests that the device is aware, in some functional sense, of the limits of what it can and cannot obtain. A subsequent trial was conducted to examine the object's behavior when queried for materials that exist naturally in a solid state. A researcher entered a request for diamond. As before, the machine hummed briefly, then displayed the same message, "out of range." Repeated testing has confirmed that SCP-294 returns this result for all solid substances requested by name. The interpretation offered is straightforward. Diamond is a solid crystalline form of carbon. The machine will not dispense liquid carbon in response to the word diamond, because liquid carbon does not constitute a diamond. The device appears to enforce a strict correspondence between the requested substance and what is delivered. To test this interpretation, a request for a cup of carbon was subsequently entered. The machine dispensed, without hesitation, a cup of liquid carbon. It is worth noting that SCP-294 itself was observed to be immune to the damaging effects associated with the dispensed material. The cup and the internal dispensing mechanism showed no signs of degradation, despite the extreme conditions ordinarily required to maintain carbon in a fluid state. Addendum designated SCP-294-M. Documents a further inquiry into the anomaly's retrieval capacity, undertaken to determine whether dispensed fluids are synthesized in place or drawn from existing sources. To this end, a unique compound was formulated comprising undisclosed ratios of a redacted brand of bleach, a redacted brand of cola, MET-RX powder, and garam masala. The mixture was prepared under controlled conditions and sealed within a container situated 25 meters from SCP-294. Upon input of the appropriate request, SCP-294 dispensed the compound. Subsequent inspection of the sealed container confirmed that an equal amount of the mixture was no longer present within it. No breach of the container and no visible transit medium was observed at any point during the trial. The findings indicate that SCP-294 is capable of retrieving fluid from remote, physically isolated sources by means presently undetermined. Addendum designated SCP-294-001 records a separate line of inquiry into the anomaly's apparent access to information. A researcher, whose designation has been redacted, entered the testing chamber under the direct observation of Level 4 personnel and keyed in a request for, quote, "the best drink I've ever had," unquote. SCP-294 dispensed a fluid similar in appearance to cola. The researcher, upon tasting the sample, identified it as a mixed drink he recalled having at a bar during his bachelor party, and was convinced it was, quote, "the best drink," unquote. Interview notes indicate that the researcher did not know what ingredients were present in the beverage, beyond rum and cola. The result raises concerns regarding the anomaly's capacity to access subjective, personal, or otherwise privileged information belonging to the operator. Further testing has been scheduled in order to ascertain the means by which SCP-294 gathers such information. In a separate testing instance, an agent of the Foundation requested from SCP-294 what was described as the best drink he had ever had. The machine complied, dispensing a dark fluid topped with white foam. Subsequent chemical analysis identified the beverage as Vienna Lager. Of particular note was the cup itself, which was printed with a color photographic image depicting 5 men and 2 women consuming beer upon a beach. The agent in question was recognizable as one of the individuals so depicted. During his subsequent briefing, the agent confirmed that his favorite beverage of all time had been a Vienna Lager consumed in the company of his friends at the beach. In light of this incident, it has now been formally confirmed that SCP-294 possesses the ability to directly gather information from the mind of the operator in order to comply with the parameters of a given request. The mechanism by which such retrieval is performed remains unknown at the time of this report. In a further recorded incident, the subject at the terminal keyed in the phrase, "the perfect drink." The machine dispensed a cup containing an odorless lavender liquid. After consuming this liquid, the subject appeared to enter a state of profound shock. The subject was removed from the testing chamber and remanded to observation. At a later date, the subject committed suicide, leaving behind a written note. The contents of the note read as follows: "I'm sorry, but at this point everything's just one big letdown." As of the filing of this addendum, none of the chemical components of the lavender liquid have been successfully identified through standard analysis. Requesting such a drink from SCP-294 a second time is, by order of Site Command, highly discouraged pending further review. Addendum designated SCP-294-T01 concerns a request of a more abstract nature. The subject keyed in the phrase, "something Cassie will like." The device was heard to hum for approximately 3 seconds before dispensing an empty cup. Printed on the side of the cup was an image of a traditional soda fountain glass, filled with something brown and topped with whipped cream. Upon introduction to SCP-085, the contents were identified by her as a chocolate banana milkshake and judged, quote, "delicious," end quote. The mechanism by which SCP-294 selected an appropriate beverage for a specified individual remains undetermined. The mechanism by which the resulting cup displayed a printed image corresponding to its contents likewise remains undetermined. Further inquiry into the device's apparent knowledge of subjects not physically present has been recommended. Addendum designated SCP-294-W documents a still more unconventional request. A researcher keyed in a request for, quote, "a cup of music," end quote. SCP-294 produced a clear, sparkling fluid that tasted vaguely alcoholic. Following ingestion, the subject reported feeling, and not hearing, a continuous rhythm. The subject further demonstrated the ability to move and even dance with a certain fluidity that he had not previously shown. Documented physical coordination during the effect exceeded the researcher's ordinary range of motion, as noted in prior personnel evaluations. Duration of the effect and any residual influence on the subject's motor function have not been disclosed in the available material. Testing on other abstract concepts is continuing. Standing protocol requires that all such requests be logged in advance, that dispensed cups be handled under standard containment procedure, and that any subject consuming the resulting fluid remain under observation for the duration of any observed effect. The full range of what SCP-294 will accept as a valid order remains a subject of ongoing study. During a mass security breach, an agent taking shelter inside a second-floor break room requested a cup of pertinent medical knowledge. Of the 4 agents present, this agent was the only one uninjured. SCP-294 dispensed a cup of clear green liquid. Following ingestion, the agent began mending the wounds of the others in a manner consistent with Foundation medical training. The agent no longer retains the medical knowledge that the liquid provided, and subsequent attempts to reproduce the effect have failed. The agent has speculated that the event constituted an emergency measure taken by the object to ensure its own preservation. In a later trial, a researcher requested his life story from SCP-294. The device emitted humming noises and shook violently for approximately 3 minutes before producing a highly viscous, opaque black liquid. Upon consumption, the researcher reported that he recalled everything that had ever happened to him. He subsequently entered his office and returned 48 hours later carrying a 538-page autobiography. A researcher produced a request consisting solely of the phrase, "Surprise me." The device produced an opaque cup containing ordinary water, later determined to have been heated to approximately 200 degrees Celsius. Upon receiving vibration from transport, the contents of the cup turned to steam, violently spraying boiling water in a 2-meter radius. A subsequent researcher submitted a request for the blood of Christ. SCP-294 vibrated and produced the message, "Hic est enim calix sanguinis me," then dispensed a paper drinking cup containing approximately 0.12 liters of red grape wine. In a further series, a researcher produced requests for a cup of Smilodon blood, a cup of passenger pigeon blood, and a cup of Thomas Jefferson's blood. Each returned an out-of-range error. Having exhausted the more esoteric inquiries into the object's biological range, testing personnel returned to procedural matters. It is worth reiterating, at this stage in the record, the formal parameters under which SCP-294 is maintained. The object has been assigned the classification Euclid. There are no standard special containment procedures on file for this item, a circumstance which reflects both the passive nature of the anomaly and the practical difficulty of applying conventional protocols to a device that outwardly resembles ordinary breakroom equipment. In place of such procedures, access restrictions have been imposed. Only personnel holding security clearance of Level 2 or higher are permitted to interact with SCP-294. All interactions are further governed by the provisions set forth in Document 294-A, which enumerates approved and prohibited request categories, and to which authorized personnel are directed for operational guidance. The physical location of the object has been the subject of some internal discussion, but at the time of this report, SCP-294 remains stored in the second-floor personnel break room. Its placement within an active staff area is considered acceptable, given the object's non-hostile behavior and the mandatory clearance threshold governing its use. To ensure compliance with these access restrictions, 2 guards holding security clearance of Level 3 are posted in observation of SCP-294 at all times. Their duties include the verification of personnel credentials, the logging of each dispensed request, and the interdiction of any attempt by uncleared staff to approach the interface. The guards are rotated on standard shift patterns and are instructed to report any deviation in the object's behavior, however minor, directly to the assigned research supervisor. No further containment measures are presently deemed necessary. Documentation of specific test requests and their outcomes continues in the appended logs. In closing, staff are reminded that the operational parameters of the object remain as previously stated. The unit presents as a standard coffee vending machine, distinguished only by an entry touchpad arranged in the configuration of an English QWERTY keyboard. Upon the deposit of 50 cents in United States currency into the coin slot, the user is prompted to enter, by way of the touchpad, the name of any liquid. Once the request has been entered, a standard 12-ounce paper drinking cup is dispensed into the delivery well, and the indicated liquid is poured into it in the ordinary manner of such machines. Initial evaluation of the object comprised 97 test runs. These included requests for common potable substances, among them water, coffee, beer, and soda. They further included requests for non-consumable liquids such as sulfuric acid, wiper fluid, and motor oil. In addition, the test protocol extended to substances that do not, under ordinary terrestrial conditions, exist in a liquid state, including nitrogen, iron, and glass. In each of the 97 initial trials, the request returned a successful delivery, the machine producing the named substance within the paper cup in an apparently stable, if not always safely handled, form. Subsequent trials involving solid materials, including a documented request for diamond, have failed to yield any product. From these results, it is inferred that the object is constrained to the delivery of substances capable, under some set of conditions, of existing in a liquid state. Materials incapable of assuming such a state fall outside its operative range. This concludes the primary description of the object. Personnel are directed to the appended logs for the itemized record of specific test requests, their entered phrasing, and the corresponding outcomes as observed by attending research staff.